Commander Elena Vasquez stood alone in the corner of the observation deck and watched the stars spin slowly past the massive windows of the Concordant station. She had been standing in corners a lot lately. 3 years ago, humanity had made first contact with the galaxy, and it had gone badly because a nervous soldier fired his weapon at what he thought was a threat, but was actually a greeting ceremony, and 17 aliens died before anyone could explain the mistake. Now humans were the pariahs of the galactic community, and Elena was the only representative Earth was allowed to send to the assembly meetings. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Ambassador Korath of the Corvani Trade Consortium approaching with his usual expression of barely hidden disgust. "Commander Vasquez," he said in his clicking voice, "I trust you have heard the news." "What news?" Elena asked. "Queen Serathkol of the Velithari. Dominion arrives within the hour," Korath said, and his four eyes narrowed. "This is unprecedented and dangerous, and I suggest you stay far away from any area she might visit." Elena had heard of the Velithari, of course, because everyone in the galaxy had heard of them. They were the apex predators of known space, and their empire spanned 12 star systems that they had conquered through sheer biological superiority. They stood over 3 meters tall with armored exoskeletons that could deflect plasma fire, and their mandibles could cut through steel, and their claws could tear through hull plating. But worst of all, they produced pheromones that triggered primal fear in almost every other species. And when a Velithari entered a room, most beings experienced an overwhelming urge to flee or freeze or die. Their queen had not left her throne world in over 200 years, and no one knew why she was coming here now. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked Korath. "Because humans are already barely tolerated here," Korath replied. "If you offend the queen in any way, she will kill you, and then she might kill others, and then we will have an incident, and the assembly will blame humanity, as they always do." He leaned closer, and his breath smelled like copper and decay. "Stay invisible, little human," he whispered. "That is the only way your species survives." Then he walked away, and Elena stood alone again, watching the stars and thinking about all the ways humanity had failed to find its place among them. An hour later, the queen arrived. Elena watched from a balcony above the main docking bay as the Velithari ship connected to the station, and the airlock opened, and the queen emerged. She was massive and terrifying and beautiful in a way that Elena had not expected. Her exoskeleton was deep purple and black, with patterns of bioluminescence running along her limbs and torso that pulsed with colors Elena had no names for. She moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large, and her guards flanked her in perfect formation, but they seemed almost unnecessary, because what could possibly threaten a creature like this? Then the fear hit Elena, felt it wash over her like a wave of ice water, and her heart began to pound, and her hands began to shake, and every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to hide, to get away from this thing that was death incarnate. She gripped the balcony railing and forced herself to breathe below her. She watched as delegates from a dozen species scattered like leaves in a wind, and some of them literally ran, and others pressed themselves against walls as if trying to disappear into the metal. Queen walked through the empty corridor that her presence had created, and Elena saw something in the way she moved that made her forget her fear for just a moment. The queen was lonely. Elena did not know how she knew this, but she was certain of it, and she watched as the most powerful being in the galaxy walked through a crowd of people who were too afraid to even look at her. And Elena thought about what that must feel like. She thought about standing in corners at diplomatic functions while aliens whispered about the dangerous humans. She thought about eating alone in the cafeteria because no one would sit with a member of a species that had killed 17 innocent beings. She thought about being judged for the worst thing her people had ever done and never being given a chance to show who she really was. The queen disappeared into the diplomatic wing, and slowly the station returned to normal. and Elena stayed on the balcony for a long time thinking about monsters and loneliness and fear. The reception that evening was tense. Every species had sent representatives, but they all clustered on the far side of the room from where the queen stood with her guards and translators. Elena stood in her usual corner and watched as ambassadors, who normally fought over every scrap of political advantage, united in their shared terror of the Velithari delegation. She noticed that no one had brought the queen a drink or offered her food from the buffet or made any attempt at the basic courtesies that were the whole point of these events. The queen just stood there glowing faintly purple in the dim light and waiting for someone to treat her like a person instead of a natural disaster. Then, the incident happened. The Drelix delegate named something Elena could not pronounce got too close to the queen's translator drone and triggered some kind of malfunction, and suddenly the drone was broadcasting the Drelix's private thoughts across the room. Filthy bugs should have been exterminated generations ago. The translation blared. Mindless killers pretending at civilization. The queen's bioluminescence flashed red and her guards raised their weapons, and the Drelix screamed, and everyone started running, and Elena saw exactly what was about to happen. Someone would die, and then someone else would die, and then there would be a war, and billions more would die, and humanity would probably be blamed somehow. She did not think about what she was doing. She just moved. Elena pushed through the panicking crowd and stepped directly between the queen and everyone else, and she faced the room with her arms spread wide. She was 5'6" and unarmed and completely human, and she had placed herself between an apex predator and her prey. "Stop," she shouted. "Everyone just stop." The room went silent. Elena could feel the queen behind her, and the fear pheromones were so strong now that her vision was going gray at the edges, and her legs wanted to collapse. But she had been afraid before. She had been afraid when the first contact went wrong and people started dying around her. She had been afraid every single day since then, wondering if today would be the day the galaxy decided humans were too dangerous to exist. Fear was an old friend, and she did not let old friends make her decisions for her. She stood her ground and waited for whatever came next. Behind her, she heard the queen make a sound she did not recognize, and then the red glow faded and the guards lowered their weapons, and Elena realized she was still alive, human. The queen said through a new translator drone, and her voice was like gravel and honey mixed together. "Yes," Elena said without turning around. "You feel our fear song, and yet you do not run." The queen said, "Why?" Elena took a deep breath and finally turned to face the most terrifying being in the galaxy. "Because fear does not get to decide what I do," she said. The queen studied her for a long moment, and her bioluminescence shifted from red to a deep, curious violet that Elena had never seen before. "Interesting," the queen said, and that was how Commander Elena Vasquez became the first human to ever have a conversation with the Velithari queen. The queen dismissed her guards with a gesture, and Elena watched 12 heavily armed Velithari warriors hesitate for the first time in their lives. "My queen," one of them said. "This human could be dangerous." The queen made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been a threat. "This small creature stood between me and an entire room of enemies," the queen said. "If she wished me harm, she would have let the chaos continue, and perhaps I would have killed someone important and started a war that would weaken my empire." She looked down at Elena with eyes that were like pools of liquid darkness. "Instead, she protected me," the queen said. "I wish to know why." The guards withdrew, and Elena found herself alone with the most powerful being in the galaxy, and the pheromones were still making her heart race and her palms sweat, but she had learned to function through fear a long time ago. "I saw what was happening," Elena said. "Someone was going to die. Many beings have seen my people kill," the queen replied. "None of them have ever stepped in front of us to stop it. Maybe they did not think they could make a difference." Elena said, "And you did." the Queen asked. No, Elena admitted. I just thought I had to try. The Queen was silent for a moment, and her bioluminescence shifted through colors. Elena could not name. I am told humans are dangerous, the Queen said. I am told your species killed 17 of the Drenari at first contact. That is true, Elena said. The words hurt to speak. A soldier made a mistake, and people died, and we have been paying for that mistake ever since. Only 17, the Queen said. My species has killed billions, and we are welcomed everywhere we go, because beings are too afraid to exclude us. She moved closer to Elena, and the fear intensified, but Elena held her ground. You are not afraid of me, the Queen said, and it was not a question. I am terrified of you. Elena replied, I just refuse to let it control me. The Queen made that sound again that might have been laughter. I would like to speak with you again, Commander Elena Vasquez, she said. Will you join me for a meal tomorrow? Elena blinked in surprise because no one had ever invited her to anything. Since she arrived on the station, I would be honored, she said. The news spread through the station like wildfire. A human had faced down the Velithari, Queen, and survived, and now she had been invited to dine with her personally, Ambassador Korath. Intercepted Elena in the corridor the next morning, and his face was twisted with fury and fear. What have you done? He demanded. I stopped a diplomatic incident, Elena said. You should be thanking me. Thanking you, Korath sputtered. You have put yourself in the path of the most dangerous creature in the galaxy, and now she has you exactly where she wants you. And where is that? Elena asked. Close enough to study, Korath said. Close enough to manipulate and use and consume when she is finished with you. Elena considered this for a moment. Maybe, she said. Or maybe she is just lonely. Korath stared at her like she had lost her mind. Lonely, he repeated. The Velithari Queen. When was the last time someone talked to her? Elena asked, not at her or about her, but actually with her like she was a person instead of a weapon. Korath had no answer for that. I am going to dinner, Elena said, and she walked away and left him standing in the corridor. The Queen's quarters took up an entire section of the station, and Elena had to pass through 3 security checkpoints to reach them. The Velithari guards watched her with expressions she could not read, and the fear pheromones grew stronger with each step. But Elena kept walking until she reached a massive door that opened at her approach. The room beyond was beautiful. It was filled with plants from dozens of worlds and water features that sparkled in carefully designed lighting, and the air was warm and smelled of flowers Elena did not recognize. The Queen waited at a table that had been adjusted to allow both of them to sit comfortably, and there were dishes arranged carefully on the surface. I have my staff research human dietary requirements, the Queen said. I hope these offerings are acceptable. Elena looked at the food and recognized most of it and felt something unexpected. She felt touched. This is wonderful, she said. Thank you for going to such trouble. They ate together and talked, and Elena learned things about the Velithari that no human had ever known. She learned that they had not always been conquerors, and that once long ago they had been peaceful hive builders who lived in harmony with their world, but something had changed in their biology, and now every generation the hives grew and needed more space, and if they did not expand, they would turn on each other and destroy themselves. We do not want to conquer, the Queen said, and her voice was heavy with exhaustion. We are compelled to conquer, and we have searched for centuries for another way, but every species we approach runs from us before we can explain. Why did you come here? Elena asked. To the assembly. The Queen was silent for a long moment. I came to ask for help. She finally said, I thought perhaps if I came in person someone would listen, but they are all so afraid, and I cannot blame them for their fear, because we have given them much to fear. She looked at Elena, and her bioluminescence was soft and sad. You are the first being in 200 years who has not run from me, she said. The first who has listened long enough to hear what I am actually saying. Elena thought about all the times she had tried to explain that humans were not monsters and no one had listened. She thought about being judged for the worst moments of her species instead of the best. What kind of help do you need? Elena asked. Our scientists believe that the expansion drive can be modified. The Queen said that we can be freed from this biological prison that forces us to consume everything in our path, but we lack the research to complete the work. What research? Elena asked. Genetic engineering, the Queen said, specifically the kind that can alter fundamental behavioral drives without destroying the individual. Elena sat back in her chair and thought about what she knew of galactic science. The Corvani have that technology, she said. They use it for their livestock. The Corvani will never share anything with us, the Queen replied. They profit too much from the fear we create and the wars we start. Elena nodded because she understood now why Karath had been so angry about her meeting with the Queen. If the Velithari stopped expanding, then the Corvani would lose their position as the power brokers who play both sides against each other. Humans have been researching genetic modification for over a century, Elena said slowly. We are not as advanced as the Corvani, but we might be able to help. The Queen looked at her and something shifted in her expression. You would do this, she asked. Help the monsters that the galaxy fears. You are not monsters, Elena said. You are people trapped by your own biology, and that is something humans understand better than you might think. She thought about all the wars humanity had fought against itself, and all the terrible things they had done because of fear and anger and instincts they had not learned to control yet. We have been fighting our own nature for our entire history. Elena said, maybe we can help you fight yours. The Queen reached across the table, and her massive clawed hand covered Elena's small human one. I think, the Queen said, that I was wrong about your species commander Elena Vasquez. Most people are, Elena replied. And for the first time since she arrived on the station, Elena smiled. Over the following weeks, Elena and Queen Sirith Kyle met every day and worked on something that had never been attempted before: a treaty between humanity and the Velithari Dominion. The terms were simple in concept but revolutionary in scope. Human scientists would share their genetic research and help the Velithari develop a way to suppress their expansion drive, and in exchange the Velithari would provide their advanced bioengineering technology that could help terraform the barren worlds humanity desperately needed for their growing population. It would change everything. Elena knew this, and the Queen knew this, and unfortunately, Ambassador Korath knew it too. The Corvani Trade Consortium had built their entire empire on being the middlemen between civilizations, and they had profited enormously from the fear the Velithari inspired. When two species were afraid of each other, they needed someone to negotiate between them, and the Corvani were always happy to take that role. For a substantial fee, a human Velithari alliance would upset the balance of power that had made the Corvani rich for millennia. So they began their campaign to destroy it. First came the whispers. Elena heard them in the corridors and in the cafeteria, and in every room she entered. Humans are hive compatible, they said. The Queen is converting her, and soon she will be a puppet. The Velithari have found a new weapon, they said. A species stupid enough to let them in close. Commander Vasquez has betrayed her own kind, they said. She has sold humanity to the bugs. Elena ignored the whispers because she had been hearing whispers about herself for 3 years, and she knew they could not hurt her unless she let them. But then the whispers became something more. She returned to her quarters one evening to find them ransacked and her personal computer destroyed, and a message written on the wall in a language she did not recognize. She took the message to the Queen and watched her bioluminescence shift to angry red as she translated it. It says, "Death to the human traitor." The Queen said, "This is Corvani script." "They are getting desperate," Elena said. "They are getting dangerous," the Queen replied. Perhaps you should return to your ship until the treaty is finalized. No, Elena said. If I run now, they win. The queen looked at her for a long moment, and then made that sound that Elena had learned was Velithari laughter. You really do not let fear control you. The queen said, I am still learning how to do this. You will get better with practice, Elena replied. But the Corvani were not finished. The attack came 3 days later. Elena was walking through the station's central hub when the alarms began to blare and the lights flickered, and people started screaming. She ran toward the queen's quarters and past dozens of beings who were fleeing in the opposite direction, and their faces were twisted with terror far beyond what normal fear would cause. Then she smelled it, the Velithari. Fear pheromones, but 100 times stronger than she had ever experienced. Someone had released concentrated pheromones into the station's air supply, and every species on the Concordance was experiencing overwhelming primal terror. Lena felt it hit her like a physical blow, and she staggered and fell against a wall, and her vision went dark, and her heart pounded so hard she thought it might explode. Run. Her instincts screamed, hide, escape, die, anything but stay here. She took a breath, and then another, and she thought about all the times she had been afraid and kept going anyway. She thought about the first contact disaster, and the 17 dead, and the years of isolation. She thought about the queen alone in her quarters, surrounded by guards who were probably losing their minds right now. Lena pushed herself off the wall and kept moving. The corridors were chaos species that had been allies for centuries, were attacking each other, and beings were trampling each other to reach escape pods. And somewhere in the distance, Elena heard weapons fire. She passed a group of Drellics who were tearing each other apart, and she did not stop because she could not help them. She passed a Corvani security team who were shooting at anything that moved, and she ducked into a side passage before they saw her. She passed bodies, so many bodies, and through it all the fear pounded in her skull and demanded that she give up and lie down and wait for death. She did not listen. Elena reached the queen's quarters and found the massive door torn off its hinges and Velithari guards fighting each other in the entrance, and she realized that the pheromones were affecting them too. They were apex predators, but they were not immune to their own weapons. She slipped past the fighting guards and entered the queen's chambers and found Sirith Kal standing in the center of the room and shaking with the effort of maintaining control. The queen's bioluminescence was throbbing through colors so fast it hurt to look at, and her claws were fully extended and her mandibles were spread wide. She was shifting into full predator mode. Elena, the queen said, and her voice was barely recognizable. You should not be here. I know, Elena said. I cannot control it. The queen said, the fear song is too strong, and my instincts are screaming at me to hunt and kill, and I cannot. She looked at Elena, and her eyes were wild with terror and rage. Run, the queen begged. Please run while you still can. Elena looked at the most powerful and dangerous being in the galaxy as she lost her battle against her own nature. She looked at the claws that could tear through steel and the mandibles that could cut her in half. She looked at her friend. No, Elena said. She walked toward the queen, and the fear was so strong now that she could barely see, and her body was shaking, and tears were streaming down her face. But she did not stop. You told me that your species has been searching for a way to overcome your biology. Elena said, this is how. She stopped directly in front of the queen, close enough to touch. You feel the fear, Elena said. You feel the rage and the hunger and the need to kill, and it is overwhelming, and it is ancient, and it is real. The queen made a sound like a wounded animal. But it is not you, Elena continued. It is just chemicals and instincts and programming from millions of years of evolution. And you are more than that. The queen's claws twitched, and Elena knew that death was inches away. You are Sirith Kal, Elena said. Queen of the Velithari, dominion, and the first of your kind to seek peace instead of conquest, and the bravest person I have ever met. She reached out and placed her small human hand on the queen's armored chest. "Choose," Elena said. "Right now in this moment, choose who you want to be." The queen screamed. It was a sound that shook the walls and shattered glass, and Elena felt it in her bones like an earthquake. And then slowly, impossibly, the strobing lights began to slow. The claws retracted. The mandibles closed. The queen stood trembling and gasping and looked down at Elena with eyes that were clear again. "How?" the queen whispered. "You chose," Elena said. "That is all it takes." The queen was silent for a long moment, and then she reached down and lifted Elena onto her shoulder. "The station is under attack," the queen said. "The Corvani have made their move. Can you stop them?" Elena asked. The queen's bioluminescence shifted to a deep, determined blue. "We can stop them," she said. "Together." And they went to war. The queen moved through the chaos of the station like a force of nature, and Elena held on tight and tried not to fall. Valathari were fast and strong, but Sirith Cow was something beyond that, because she was a queen who had just done the impossible. And she was not going to let anyone take that away from hers. They passed through corridors filled with panicking beings, and Elena called out directions based on the station maps she had memorized during her years of isolation. "Left here," she shouted. "The command center is 3 levels up." The queen crashed through a security door without slowing down around them. The pheromone attack was still driving species mad with fear. But Elena noticed something strange. The beings they passed seemed to calm slightly when they saw the queen. Maybe it was because she was moving with purpose instead of hunting. Maybe it was because her bioluminescence was steady and calm instead of predatory red ore. Maybe it was because she was carrying a small human on her shoulder, and that was so unexpected that it broke through the chemical terror. "Your presence is helping them," Elena said. "I noticed," the queen replied. "I think they can sense that I am in control, and it gives them something to focus on." They reached a vertical shaft, and the queen began to climb using her claws to grip the walls, and Elena held on and tried not to look down. "The Corvani will have the command center heavily defended," Elena said. "They cannot let us reach the environmental controls." "How many guards?" the queen asked. "I do not know," Elena admitted. "But they will be armed with plasma weapons and probably wearing sealed suits to protect them from the pheromones." "Then we will need to be clever," the queen said. They emerged onto the command level and found exactly what Elena had feared. 12 Corvani soldiers in full combat armor stood in front of the command center doors, and their weapons were raised and ready. Behind them, Elena could see Ambassador Korath watching through a window with a smile on his face. "Queen Sarith Kolon of the soldiers announced, 'You are ordered to stand down and surrender.'" The queen stopped moving, and Elena felt her muscles tense for combat. "Wait," Elena said. "Let me talk to them." "They will not listen," the queen replied. "Maybe not," Elena said, "but we have to try." She climbed down from the queen's shoulder and walked toward the soldiers, and they tracked her with their weapons, but did not fire. "Ambassador Korath," Elena called out. "I know you are behind this." The door opened, and Korath stepped out with a plasma pistol in his hand, and his smile had grown wider. "Commander Vasquez," he said, "I warned you to stay away from the queen, but you did not listen, and now look at what has happened." "You released the pheromones," Elena said. "You caused all of this." "I prevented a disaster," Korath replied. "A human Valathari alliance would have destroyed the balance of power that has kept this galaxy stable for 10,000 years. "Stable? For who?" Elena asked. "Stable for the Corvani, who profit from every war and every fear." Korath shrugged. "Someone has to maintain order," he said, "and we do it well. You have killed hundreds of beings today." Elena said, "Maybe thousands. Regrettable losses," Korath said, "but necessary to prevent billions dying in the wars that your alliance would have caused." Elena looked at him and saw someone who had convinced himself that murder was mathematics and that the galaxy was just a machine to be optimized for profit. The Queen came here seeking peace, Elena said. She wanted to end the expansion that has cost so many lives, and you sabotaged it because peace is bad for business. Peace is an illusion, Korath said. There is only power. And those who wield it, and your precious queen, would have upset the distribution of power in ways that could not be controlled. He raised his pistol and aimed it at Elena's head. Now I will give you one chance, Commander, he said. Walk away, and let us handle the queen, and perhaps your species will survive this incident. Elena did not move. No, she said. Korath sighed. I thought you might say that, he said. He gestured to his soldiers. Kill them both. The queen moved faster than Elena's eyes could follow, and suddenly she was standing between Elena and the soldiers, and their plasma bolts were splashing harmlessly against her armored exoskeleton. But Korath had planned for this. Activate the failsafe, he shouted. Elena heard a loud click from inside the command center, and then alarms began to blare even louder than before. I have armed the station's self-destruct, Korath announced. If you take one more step toward us, I will vent every section to space, and everyone aboard will die. The Queen stopped. You would kill your own soldiers, she asked. They are soldiers, Korath said. They know the risks. Elena looked at the Corvani troops and saw that some of them were not happy about this development, but none of them moved. What do you want? Elena asked. I want the Queen to surrender, Korath said. I want her to confess that she came here to conquer the station, and that this attack was a Velithari plot, and I want humanity blamed for collaborating with her. That is a lie. Elena said. Truth is whatever the powerful say it is, Korath replied. And after today, the Corvani will be more powerful than ever. Elena looked at the Queen and saw her bioluminescence flickering with rage. She knew that Serethkel could kill everyone. In this corridor in seconds, she knew that the Velithari were warriors who had never surrendered in their entire history. She knew that asking the Queen to accept this humiliation might be asking too much, but she asked anyway. Serethkel, Elena said softly. Do not fight them? The Queen's eyes snapped to her. You cannot be serious, she said. If you attack now, everyone on this station dies, Elena said, including the people we came to save. And if I surrender, my people will be branded as monsters. Forever, the Queen replied. Everything we have worked for will be destroyed. Maybe, Elena said. Or maybe not. She turned back to Korath. You said truth is whatever the powerful say it is. Elena said, but you forgot something. What is that? Korath asked. There are thousands of beings on this station who just watched your soldiers attack them. Elena said, there are recordings and witnesses and evidence that will prove what really happened here. She pointed at the Queen, and there's the Velithari. Queen who had every reason to kill everyone in her path and chose not to, she said, who fought through the worst attack her species has ever experienced and maintained control, and came here to save lives instead of taking them. Korath laughed. No, one will believe that, he said. The Velithari are monsters and everyone knows it. They believe that about humans too, Elena said, until today. She stepped forward and Korath raised his weapon. The truth will come out, Elena said. Maybe not today, and maybe not tomorrow, but eventually everyone will know what you did here. She looked at the Queen, and they will know what she did too. The Queen was silent for a long moment, and her bioluminescence shifted through colors that Elena had never seen before. Then, she did something that had never been done in the history of the Velithari Dominion. She retracted her claws and lowered her head. I surrender, she said. Korath stared at her in disbelief. Soldiers stared at her in disbelief, even. Elena stared at her in disbelief. You are joking, Korath said. I am a queen of the Velithari. Serethkel replied. We do not joke. She looked at Elena. The human is right, she said. There has been too much death today, and I will not add to it even. To save my own honor, Korath did not know how to respond. He had built his entire plan around the certainty that a Valathari would always choose violence, and now that certainty had crumbled. "Take them into custody," he finally said, but his voice was uncertain. Now the soldiers moved forward, and Elena stood beside the queen as they were surrounded. "Thank you," Elena whispered. "I hope you are right about the truth," the queen replied. Elena said. "I promise," and she meant it. 1 year later, the Galactic Assembly gathered once again on the rebuilt Concordant Station. Elena stood at the back of the Great Hall and watched as representatives from over 100 species filed into their seats. She was not standing in a corner. This time, she was wearing the formal uniform of an ambassador, and the silver insignia of the Human Diplomatic Corps gleamed on her chest. A lot had changed in the past year. After Korath's coup failed, the evidence had come out just as Elena predicted. Thousands of beings had recorded the attack, and their testimonies painted a clear picture of what had really happened. The Corvani Trade Consortium had been shattered by the scandal, and Korath himself was serving a life sentence on a prison. More importantly, the recordings had shown something that no one expected. They showed a Valathari queen choosing peace over violence. They showed an apex predator surrendering to protect innocent lives. They showed a monster becoming something else entirely. The galaxy had watched those recordings over and over, and slowly their understanding of the Valathari began to change. Now the assembly was gathering to witness the formal signing of the Human Valathari Cooperation Treaty, and Elena could feel the historic weight of the moment pressing down on her. A door opened at the side of the hall, and Queen Serethkal entered. She moved with the same grace she always had, but something about her was different now. Her bioluminescence was calm and steady, and her guards walked beside her instead of in front of her, and beings in the audience actually turned to look at her with curiosity. Instead of terror, Elena watched as the queen approached the central podium and felt a swell of pride, for her friend Serethkal stood before the assembly, and the room fell silent. 1 year ago, I came to this station seeking help. The queen began. I came because my people were trapped by our own nature, and we did not know how to escape. She paused, and her gaze swept across the audience. Every species I approached fled before I could explain what we needed, she continued. They saw a monster, and they ran, and I could not blame them because we had given them many reasons to run. Her bioluminescence shifted to a soft blue. Then I met a human. Elena felt hundreds of eyes turn toward her. Commander Elena Vasquez stood between me and a room full of terrified beings, the queen said. Everyone told her to run, but she did not listen because she saw something that no one else could see. The queen looked directly at Elena. She saw a queen who was tired of being alone. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes, but she did not look away. The humans taught me something that has changed my understanding of the universe, the queen continued. They taught me that biology is not destiny. She lifted one massive clawed hand. These claws were designed to kill, she said. This body was built for conquest, and this mind was programmed for expansion. But I have learned that I can choose to be something else. Her bioluminescence shifted through colors that Elena now recognized as Valathari emotional language. The humans call it willpower, the queen said. The ability to feel an instinct and choose not to obey it. She lowered her hand. My people have been slaves to our nature for millions of years, she said. We expanded because we had to, and we killed because we had to, and we were alone because everyone was too afraid to stand beside us. She turned back to the audience. But the humans showed us that we do not have to be what we were born to be. The queen gestured, and a holographic display appeared showing complex genetic diagrams. The research is still in its early stages, she said, but our scientists, working alongside human geneticists, have made remarkable progress, and we believe that within 1 generation we will be able to free our people from the expansion drive that has caused so much suffering. A murmur ran through the assembly as beings realized what this meant. The most feared species in the galaxy was about to change, and the universe would never be the same. This treaty represents more than a trade agreement, the Queen said. It represents a new possibility for all species who have been trapped by their own biology or their own history or their own fear. She looked at Elena again. If a Velithari queen can learn to show mercy, then perhaps others can learn too. The Queen stepped back and the assembly erupted in applause. And Elena found herself walking forward without consciously deciding to move. She climbed the steps to the podium and stood beside the Queen, and together they signed the treaty that would reshape galactic civilization. The applause grew louder, and beings who had once fled from the Velithari were now approaching to offer congratulations. Elena watched as species that had never dared to speak to the Queen lined up to shake her massive clawed hand. "You were right," the Queen said quietly. "The truth did come out." "It usually does," Elena replied. Eventually, they stood together watching the celebration, and Elena thought about how far they had both come. A year ago, she had been a pariah standing in corners and waiting for the galaxy to decide whether her species deserved to exist. Now she was an ambassador and a hero and a symbol of something she had never expected to become. "May I ask you something?" the Queen said. "Of course, that first day when you stepped between me and the crowd." The Queen said, "You told me that fear does not get to decide what you do." "I remember. But later you told me that you were terrified," the Queen said. "So why did you really do it?" Elena was silent for a moment. "Because I know what it is like when everyone is afraid of you," she finally said. "When they see the worst thing you could be instead of who you actually are." She looked up at the Queen. "I thought maybe you were lonely," she said, "and I did not want you to feel that way anymore." The Queen's bioluminescence shifted to a color Elena had only seen once before during their first dinner together. "My people have not used this color in 10,000 years," the Queen said. "It means gratitude so deep that it cannot be expressed in words." She placed her massive hand gently on Elena's shoulder. "Thank you, Elena Vasquez," she said, "for seeing me when no one else could." Later that evening, Elena stood on the observation deck and watched the stars. She was not alone this time. The Queen stood beside her, and they watched as ships from dozens of worlds departed from the station, carrying news of the treaty to every corner of the galaxy. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now we do the hard work," the Queen replied. "We change our biology and our culture and our history, and we become something new." "That sounds difficult." "It will be the hardest thing my people have ever done," the Queen said. "But we have learned from the humans that hard things are possible if you are willing to choose." Elena smiled. "You know, the other species are going to start asking for human liaisons," she said. "They saw what happened here, and they want someone who can help them see past their fears." "I am not surprised," the Queen said. "Your species has a gift for this." "For what?" "For seeing the person behind the monster." Elena thought about this. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe we are just too stubborn to run when we should." The Queen made her laughter sound. "That too." They stood together in comfortable silence and watched the stars spin past a year ago. Elena had been the most isolated being on this station, and now she stood beside the most powerful queen in the galaxy and called her friend. A year ago, humans had been pariahs, and now they were sought after as diplomats and peacemakers. A year ago, the Velithari had been monsters, and now they were something else entirely, all because one small human had refused to run. "They told me not to go near you," Elena said softly. "I know," the Queen replied. "They told me you were dangerous." Elena laughed. "Maybe they were right about both of us." The Queen's bioluminescence shifted to warm gold. "Perhaps they were," she said. "But dangerous is not the same as evil, and fear is not the same as truth." She looked down at Elena with eyes that had once inspired terror across the galaxy. "You taught me that," she said, "and I will spend the rest of my life making sure the galaxy learns it too." Elena reached up and placed her hand on the Queen's arm. Together, she said. Together, the Queen agreed. And as the stars wheeled past them both, Elena knew that this was only the beginning. Galaxy was changing, and humanity had finally found its place among the stars. Not as warriors or conquerors or threats to be contained, but as the species that was too stubborn to let fear decide who they should become, and that made all the difference.